There are legends built from talent, and then there are legends carved from pain. Jason Statham belongs to the second kind. At 58, the world sees an unbreakable action hero, a man who jumps through fire and walks out of explosions as if fate itself fears him. But behind that steel, behind the roar of engines and the smash of shattered glass, lives a truth far more haunting than any scene he has ever filmed. Before the fame, before the billion-dollar box office, there was a boy standing in the freezing wind of Shirebrook, watching his parents count coins by the dim light of a flickering bulb. Hunger was his first teacher. Silence was his first audience. And survival was the only role life ever offered him. No one knew then that this quiet, sharp-eyed boy would one day become the last real warrior of modern action cinema. No one knew that each dive he took, each punch he learned, each bruise he carried, but destiny never opens its doors without demanding a toll. And Jason Statham has paid every price. This is not just the story of an actor. This is the journey of a man who rose from the cold streets with nothing but grit, scars, and an iron will. A man who came close to breaking more than once, yet kept moving, because stopping meant losing everything. Jason Statham entered the world on July 26, 1967, in a place where dreams froze before they could grow. Shirebrook, a mining town coated in coal dust and long winters, where the smell of smoke clung to your clothes, and hope felt like something only other families could afford. His mother Eileen was a dancer, whose applause faded faster than the echoes in an empty theater. His father Barry worked every job a man could take: miner at dawn, painter at noon, street seller at dusk, and a pub singer when the night grew loud enough to hide exhaustion. Their little house was always filled with quiet worry. The single kitchen bulb flickered, while his parents counted coins, promising each other that tomorrow would somehow stretch a bit farther. Jason grew up watching survival, dressed as routine. He followed his father through the chilly markets of Great Yarmouth, selling cheap jewelry and perfume that few people wanted, but he still had to smile for. He learned early that childhood was a luxury. "You earn your place in this world," his father would say, without saying it. "You do not wait for it." His older brother Lee chased footballs. Jason chased motion. At an age when most boys were playing in the mud, he was copying karate kicks behind old buildings, jumping into cold pools, teaching his muscles to obey. Long before he understood why it mattered. There was no roadmap, no mentor, just the instinct of a boy who believed movement was the only way out. And in that restless search, a spark began to form. A spark that would soon shape everything he became. Life had already tested him, and he had not broken. But the world was preparing its first real blow. A blow that would change the direction of his life forever. When most boys dreamed with their eyes open, Jason dreamed with his body. Motion was his language. Discipline was his compass. At 12 years old, far later than any serious athlete should begin, he walked into the Crystal Palace National Sports Centre in London and signed himself up for diving. Other kids had been training since they were 5. They had coaches, structure, and years of perfect form. Jason had none of that. What he did have was hunger, the kind no medal could fill. So, while the others went home after practice, he stayed, silently climbing back up the ladder, diving again, and again, and again, until the janitor turned off the lights and the water below him looked like a sheet of black glass. The winter air cut through his skin. The pool echoed like a cavern. His hands were rubbed raw, his muscles screaming for rest. But quitting was never in the vocabulary of a boy raised inside struggle. In the empty silence he found something rare. Focus. The kind that can only be born from loneliness. Years passed. His form sharpened. His body transformed. And finally, in 1990, Jason Statham represented England at the Commonwealth Games. For a brief heartbeat, it looked like the boy from Shirebrook might rise all the way to the Olympics. The world felt within reach. The dream almost real. Then came 1992. Jason missed the British Olympic team by one single spot. One. The kind of loss that does not knock you down, but takes the ground from beneath your feet. 10 years of sacrifice disappeared in the stillness of the pool's surface. No applause, no second chances, just silence. He did not cry. He simply watched the water calm, as if it were swallowing his dream whole. And in that cold reflection, he understood a truth that would follow him forever. Effort is not always rewarded, but endurance, the ability to rise from nothing, returns as strength. He left the pool behind, but the pool never left him. Because every stunt he would one day perform, every punch, every chase, every explosion, carried the ghost of that young diver who refused to quit when no one was watching. 1992 should have been the beginning of something. Instead, it became the year Jason Statham walked away from everything he had ever trained for. No medals, no future in sports, only a suitcase, a few pounds in his pocket, and a city that did not care who he was. London was grey, wet, and merciless, a place where dreams drowned quietly in the rain. Jason slept wherever he could afford. Tiny rooms with broken radiators, apartments that smelled of mold and cold metal. Some nights, he woke to see his own breath hanging in the air. He wrapped himself tighter in an old coat and whispered the same prayer he had whispered as a child. Just one more day. To survive, he sold whatever he could carry. Cheap perfume, fake watches, trinkets that sparkled under streetlights but meant nothing in a city that never stopped moving. Most people walked past him without a glance. Some cursed, some threw his merchandise back at him. He nodded, swallowed the insult, and kept going. Pride was a luxury. Survival was not. But every night, when the streets emptied and the noise faded, Jason returned to the only thing that had ever given him control. Training. Push-ups beside a broken bed. Shadowboxing in the mirror. Diving motions without water. Fighting the ghost of failure that refused to let him sleep. He was not proud of that chapter. He would later say, "I sold what I had because I refused to steal what I did not." And in that single sentence lived the blueprint of the man he was becoming. Honest, tough, unshakably resilient. Years passed like that. London storms above him, hunger inside him, silence around him. And then one day, when hope had thinned to a thread, fate finally cracked open a door. At the Crystal Palace Sports Center, the same place where he had once chased Olympic dreams, a modeling agency noticed him. They liked his face. Not soft, not polished. A face carved by struggle. A face that told the truth. Soon Jason found himself posing for Tommy Hilfiger, Levis Griffin, and French Connection. The pay was small, the recognition even smaller. Between shoots, he was still back on the streets selling perfume. But something had changed. For the first time, someone looked at him and saw potential. And that tiny spark, that fragile sliver of belief, was about to lead him straight into the moment that would rewrite his entire life. Destiny rarely walks up to you politely. Sometimes it knocks by accident. That was exactly how Jason Statham met the man who would change his life forever. Through a modeling contact, Jason was introduced to a young director named Guy Ritchie. At the time, Ritchie was casting for his first feature film, a gritty crime comedy called Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. He needed someone who could play a street hustler. Not act like one, be one. Someone who understood the smell of rain on pavement, the weight of an empty pocket, the quiet rage of hunger. When Ritchie saw Jason, he did not see a model. He saw truth. Jason did not audition in the traditional sense. He simply talked. He told stories about London corners where deals went wrong. About nights he had stood in the cold, trying to sell watches to people who never stopped walking. He spoke the language of survival with a calm, raw honesty that no actor could fake. Halfway through his story, Richie leaned in and said one sentence that would cut open a new path in Jason's life. "You are the man. You do not have to act. You lived it." The role paid $5,000. But that small paycheck became the key to a new world. When Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels hit theaters in 1998, Jason Statham was no longer a hustler selling perfume on the streets. He was a new force in British cinema. Audiences saw something different in him. A man who did not pretend to be tough. He simply was. 2 years later came Snatch, where he starred alongside Brad Pitt. Jason was no longer the unknown newcomer. He was the heartbeat of a new wave of action. Confident, sharp, magnetic. Hollywood started to take notice. Then, in 2002, everything changed. The transporter arrived like a thunderclap. Jason trained in Wing Chun, kickboxing, and Krav Maga. He refused a stunt double. Every punch, every fall, every explosion was real, and audiences felt it. For the first time, global cinema had a hero who did not hide behind effects or wires. Jason Statham became a phenomenon. But success is never free. And as the world celebrated him, a quieter battle began inside the man who had risen so far, so fast. Because fame brings light, but it also brings shadows. Fame arrived like a storm, loud, bright, unavoidable. But beneath all that light, Jason Statham discovered something he never expected. The higher you rise, the quieter the world becomes. In the early years of his career, before red carpets and private jets, there was Kelly. She was already famous, already dazzling, already everything he was not. Jason was still hustling, still climbing, still carrying the weight of years spent sleeping in cold rooms and selling perfume for survival. Together, they were fire and calm, chaos and belief. She loved him when the world did not know his name, when he was just a man fighting for a place in a world that kept shutting doors. But success has a strange way of stretching the distance between two people. As Jason began traveling for films, Kelly's life moved faster in a completely different direction. He chased stunts and bruises. She chased cameras and glamour. Calls grew shorter. Smiles thinned. Silence settled in the space where love had lived. And then the headlines came. Kelly with someone new. Another actor. Another story. Another heartbreak. Jason did not scream. He did not break things. He did not blame her. He simply went quiet. He took the pain the same way he had taken every punch in his life. Silent. Controlled. Hidden beneath layers of discipline. Friends said he trained harder than ever during that time, as if sweat could drown out the memories he did not want to hold. When he finally began to heal, life brought someone unexpected. Sophie Monk. She was warm, wild, funny, the kind of woman who filled a room with energy. With her, Jason laughed again. Real laughter. The kind he had forgotten he was capable of. But fame is a storm that never sleeps. He traveled more, she worked more, and distance, once again, spoke louder than any argument ever could. They parted without a fight, without blame, without bitterness. Just two people pulled apart by the lives they lived. Then came Alex Zosman. Quiet, gentle, stable. She offered peace in a world filled with noise. For a moment, Jason believed he had finally outrun the loneliness that followed him everywhere. But movies demanded flights. Months away. Endless shoots. Eventually, even the strongest patience breaks. Their goodbye was soft, almost whispered. No drama, only two tired hearts letting go. Through all the fame, applause, and roaring engines, Jason Statham learned the most painful truth of his life. The spotlight can make you visible to the entire world, but it cannot keep you from feeling alone. After years of storms, Jason Statham did not expect peace. And peace certainly did not arrive wrapped in fire or chaos. It arrived quietly, almost shyly, in the form of Rosie Huntington Whiteley. She was 23 when they met. Graceful, soft-spoken, the kind of beauty that did not need attention to be noticed. Jason was 43, a man shaped by loss, duty, and years of silence. He had lived through betrayal, distance, and an aching loneliness success never cured. Rosie walked into his life without fear, without expectations, without trying to change the man he was. One evening over wine, she teased him gently. "You do not talk much, do you?" He smiled, a small, careful smile. "I have said enough in bruises." And something shifted. Their love did not explode. It unfolded. Slow, grounded, certain. They cooked simple meals together, took walks in the rain, hid from paparazzi in quiet corners of London. In those small moments, Jason found something he had never allowed himself to believe he deserved: stillness. With Rosie, the world no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like home. By 2016, after 6 years together, they stood under a Malibu sunset and got engaged. No spectacle, no diamonds screaming for attention, just a quiet promise built from patience, healing, and trust. A year later, their son Jack Oscar was born. Jason, the man who once jumped from burning cars and dove through glass, found himself undone by the tiny fingers wrapped around his own. He whispered to Rosie one night, while watching Jack sleep, "This is the only fight. I never want to win." But fatherhood came with its own heartbreak. Movie sets demanded travel. Weeks away, months away. He missed first steps, first words, first birthdays. Rosie never complained. She left handwritten notes in his suitcase. "Come home soon. We love you." Then in 2022, their daughter Isabella James arrived, giving Jason a second chance at the moments he had once lost. Now, at 58, he protects his family with a fierce tenderness. Their mornings are filled with pancakes and laughter, evenings filled with warmth, not noise. He no longer chases Hollywood. He chooses home, but fate, as always, was not finished with him. Because even in his happiest years, shadows waited at the edge of the frame. Action movies look loud on screen. Explosions, flames, roaring engines. But the tragedies behind them arrive in silence. Jason Statham learned this truth in the most brutal ways possible. It began in 2011 on the set of The Expendables 2 in Bulgaria. The day was bright, calm, almost peaceful. Jason was rehearsing a chase scene near a quiet lake. Beside him stood Kun Liu, a 26-year-old stuntman from China, full of energy, full of dreams. He told Jason that morning, "One day, I will be where you are." Jason laughed, clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Stay hungry, mate. Never lose that fire." Moments later, that fire turned into tragedy. An explosion detonated seconds too early. The blast ripped through the set, shattering the air. People screamed, smoke swallowed the sky. Jason ran toward the wreckage, calling Kun's name, but found only chaos, debris, the heavy stillness of disaster. Kun Liu did not survive. Jason did not talk about it publicly. He did not want his colleague's death to become a headline drowned in movie promotion. But something inside him fractured. He trained harder, but spoke less. Before every stunt afterward, before every take, he closed his eyes for a moment of silence. Not a prayer, a tribute. But fate was not done with him. In late 2013, while filming Fast and Furious 7, Jason found himself welcomed into a brotherhood he had never known. At the center of that brotherhood stood Paul Walker, warm, gentle, kind in a way Hollywood rarely allows men to be. Paul embraced Jason instantly. "You are one of us now, mate." It was not a greeting. It was a home. They bonded over cars, family, and the strange loneliness of fame. Paul talked often about his charity work, Reach Out Worldwide, and his dream of taking his daughter Meadow on missions one day. "You do what you love, but you live for what you give," he told Jason once, under the glow of set lights. Then came November 30th. Paul Walker was gone. A speeding Porsche. A split second. A crash so violent the world froze. Jason arrived quietly at the memorial, standing at the edge of the crowd, head lowered. No cameras, no statements, only grief. Later he said, "When Paul died, the world lost a star. But for us, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath our feet." Filming continued, but nothing felt the same. Every engine roar carried a ghost. Every smile felt heavier. Jason once said, "You do not move on from a man like Paul. You carry his light." And from that moment, Jason Statham's relationship with danger changed forever.